Some viewers may find this disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
You guys are gonna see some weird things in the recommended video section, huh? Now, when SpongeBob does something so horrendous, they tend to do it only once. And praise the Lord for that. There's only one Splinter, and there's only one Appel for Gary. However, there is one area they don't relent ever, and that's turning the entire universe against Squidward. There are two reasons that I'm doing this as a list. Number one is that it's going to get really old if I do a dozen different reviews about episodes that are all bad in the exact same way. You can only say that putting Squidward at the ass of your jokes doesn't automatically make them funny in so many ways. The other reason is that they've done this so many times, this is the only way I could put it into perspective. Let me put it this way. I am reviewing the 10 worst episodes of the exact same basic premise. I've disqualified Squid Baby and Squid's Visit, and there are about 7 others that I've considered for this list but didn't piss me off enough to include. That is 19 episodes where the basic plot is that we're treated to Squidward's pain and agony because the writers think it's funny. I mean, it had to have worked at some point, right? It was funny once upon a time and gave us episodes like Squid's Day Off, Opposite Day, or Club SpongeBob. So what happened? What makes it funny in those episodes and not in Squid Baby or Squid's Visit? Okay, that answer's pretty obvious. The former aren't as creepy as fuck or put their target ridicule in a diaper. But if it was a common and accepted plot thread, how did it get so terrible? Well, I know the answer to that already, but for the sake of humor, let's say I don't and find out why.
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage can. Person man, is he depressed or is he a mess? Does he feel totally worthless? Who came up with person man, degraded man, person man?
You know the funny thing about doing lists like this? When you do it as honestly as possible and analyze your choices, you rarely get what you would expect. When I started this list, this episode was originally like number 4, but through a combination of reevaluation and watching some new episodes for the first time, it got knocked back by some stiff competition. So let's talk about boat smarts. First of all, let's knock out the elephant in the room. Some may be tempted to call this a ripoff of the Krusty Krab training video. I don't agree. This is more of a certain style, similar to Family Guy's Road 2 series. That being said, that is the only defense I can muster for this shitty excuse for an episode. This episode tries to show us the difference between a driver with boat smarts and a driver without boat smarts. A driver with boat smarts gets maimed, tortured, and beaten for doing the right thing, while a driver who doesn't goes through the whole episode unscathed. Now, in a pre-movie episode, Squidward would have gotten torment because he would be too arrogant to think he needs to follow proper safety procedures. In these modern episodes, he suffers torment because he's Squidward, and for no other reason whatsoever. Now, there are 2 particular reasons that I thought this episode would be higher on the list. The first reason is that Squidward is getting punished for proper safety precautions. You know, like wearing his seatbelt.
Well, at least he had his seatbelt on.
Yeah, I'm not going on the whole agenda that SpongeBob is trying to teach things like the fun of unemployment, and it normally gets a pass from me on stuff like that. But this episode is trying to present itself as, you know, educational. If it's parody, do it right! The other reason is that fucking stinger at the end.
Looks like you guys forgot your boat smarts! Ah!
That line there, said by someone with no boat smarts to 2 people with boat smarts, guaranteed it a spot on this list. I mean, that is just one of the most infuriating lines an episode could end on. Okay, not the most infuriating, but it's gotta be up there.
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage can. Person man.
Alright, let's get this out of the way.
Ow! Okay, it's on my foot.
Okay.
Yeah, that one moment single-handedly brought this episode into infamy, and it places on most people's worst list even higher than the Splinter, which I really personally don't understand. I guess you could make the case that the toenail scene is more relatable than the Splinter, and the Splinter is technically cartoonish and over the top, but I'd rather have like 10 seconds than an entire episode based around pain, gross out, and misery. What's surprising to me is that Jean Charmot's, you know, this fucker, had absolutely nothing to do with this episode. It looks like more than one person on the writing staff has got some serious gore fascination going on here. You know, I pretty much already talked about his gore as much as I could in that review, and I keep calling House Fancy the reverse The Splinter. The Splinter is an episode that's loaded with gross out and shoehorns in some Squidward torture porn. House Fancy is an episode loaded with Squidward torture porn that's got gross out shoehorned in. They do have one thing in common though. If you don't care about gross out, both of these episodes are fucking boring. I mean, it's not as boring as The Place the Thing, which was one of the candidates for this list, but it's up there. Excellent! Squilliam's got a great house filled with all kinds of riches. If I cared, I'd be watching people make sim houses on YouTube. I mean, there's one point where Squilliam shows the host a gilded doorknob, and he acts like he's got a fetish about the thing, and when Squilliam shows him a ton, he acts like he doesn't fucking care. SpongeBob enters the plot because he flat out admits that he was spying on Squidward, and for the majority of the episode, nothing happens. If it wasn't for that fucking toenail scene, then no one would ever bring this episode up. Part of me thinks that that's kind of why the writers did it, but for the most part, there's nothing really to talk about here. Why isn't it higher on the list? Well, for one, Squidward actually won in the end. The only other torture porn where Squidward won that I can think of is Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful, but that one didn't have a toenail scene being brutally ripped off, so it was at a disadvantage. And that's the other reason that House Fancy isn't higher. It had some stiff competition of worse writing, more annoyance, and more torment to Squidward.
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage can. Person man.
Do you want to know exactly where SpongeBob went wrong? Like, the exact day? May 20th, 2005, the day that Good Neighbors aired. A plot revolving around Patrick and SpongeBob annoying Squidward wasn't anything new, but at the time, this was the worst possible way they could have done it. Issue number 1. Squidward wasn't being an ass or arrogant or anything at the beginning of the episode. He was just trying to enjoy his Sunday, the only day of the week he had off, which is weird because the whole earlier episode revolved around Squidward lamenting the fact that he didn't get Sundays off. Yeah, even as a kid, I noticed problems about this episode. The episode goes on and on with Patrick and SpongeBob annoying Squidward and eating up his Sunday. The biggest problem with this episode is how incredibly stupid they are. They only finally realize that they made some kind of whoopsie when Squidward yells at them and finally manages to break through their thick skulls. You guys might want to savor this because as far as I can tell, this was the last time that anyone ever managed to break through their stupidity. And it only barely works. And that's only because it's in service to the plot. Squidward gets a security system, but because SpongeBob and Patrick are coming in to apologize, the security system doesn't see them as a threat, because that's exactly how security systems work. Then the episode loses all logic as the security system kicks Squidward out of his house as it goes on a rampage to destroy Bikini Bottom. I don't know why it goes on to destroy Bikini Bottom. Does it make any logical sense? No. Is it necessary to the plot? Not really. Is it even remotely funny? Not in the slightest. Then the episode ends with Squidward getting a summon to clean up Bikini Bottom for every Sunday for the rest of his life. So the episode comes off as Squidward getting punished for not taking it in the ass when SpongeBob and Patrick want to torment him. It makes you wonder why he doesn't get a restraining order against them. Well,
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage can. Person man.
you ever wonder why Squidward doesn't take legal actions against SpongeBob? Well, he did. Once. In a terrible episode. My last 3 choices were all interchangeably bad, and I could have put them in any order. So now we're getting into the episodes that enrage me. In fact, I'm really surprised that this particular episode doesn't get more hate. Granted, I hadn't seen it myself before I started making this list, but I'm sure someone somewhere else has to have seen it and seen how horrible it truly is. It seems to start like a typical SpongeBob annoys Squidward plot, until they get to the Krusty Krab. What follows is one of the most uncomfortable sequences I've ever seen in the show. Dead fucking serious. In most of these episodes, the writers don't know they're going too far because they're incompetent as all hell. Here, they are intentionally trying to go too far with Squidward's torment, and it quickly becomes hard to watch. In fact, it seems like they stuffed everything wrong with modern SpongeBob into a 1-minute long window. Squidward torture, SpongeBob making things worse through stupidity, and Mr. Krabs caring about money more than life. At the end, Squidward snaps. The next day, he gives SpongeBob his own restraining order. If SpongeBob violates it, he will go to jail. Now here's the main problem with the episode. SpongeBob is close to his original personality, making Squidward seem like the bad guy for trying to keep SpongeBob away from him. If there's anywhere he should be back to normal, it shouldn't be here. So, there's no SpongeBob to torment Squidward. What are our clever, sadistic writers to do? Use Patrick! If I ever make another list like this, it's going to be the top 10 worst Patrick's a Prick episodes. Because that's the other overused way of being terrible on the show. And yeah, they double dip a few times. The rest of the episode goes on to have Patrick annoy Squidward, and by extension the audience. And the question arises of why the fuck Squidward doesn't get another restraining order. And the way that Squidward gets tormented are, let's call them forced.
Grammy, I brought your favorite, seaberry pie.
And Squidward is allergic to that pie for this one moment only. Since he's got bumps on his face, Patrick thinks that Squidward is a monster who is after SpongeBob and attacks him. SpongeBob violates his restraining order to break them up. Then Squidward replaces SpongeBob's name on the restraining order with Patrick's. Patrick starts laughing hysterically, and the episode just stops. Yeah, that's how it ends. It's never mentioned if Patrick was under a restraining order in any other episode. Guys, you gotta end the stories you're trying to tell. I mean, is that too much to ask for?
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage
Do you guys want to see a worse version of House Fancy? No? Well, too bad, because they made one! Presenting Pineapple Fever. No, seriously, it recycles the episode point for point. Like, out of nowhere gore for having the sake of out of nowhere gore! Yeah, I assume that no one talks about probably one of the most gruesome moments of the show because House Fancy did take all of its thunder. Most Squidward torture porns have the entire plot revolve around him. You know, it shows us a day in the life of Squidward. This episode shoehorns him in solely to torture him. I'm completely serious. After a weather report says a storm is coming, Patrick and SpongeBob begin doing a bunch of construction, because that's what you do during a thunderstorm. This gets Squidward to rip his eyebrow off and angrily storms over to SpongeBob's house, in which the aforementioned storm stops him from walking 5 yards without getting drenched by undersea rain and zapped by undersea lightning. I hear that that's a real problem off the coast of New Zealand. So Squidward is forced to tolerate SpongeBob and Patrick's stupidity.
See?
Squidward, the lights went off.
Yes, they did. When you turn them off.
Why was that line even necessary? At a later point, we see that the house gets zapped by lightning. That'd be an excellent excuse to have the power go out. This is another episode where the majority of the plot is spent on nothing happening. And if you haven't guessed by now, that's an aspect of modern SpongeBob that I don't fucking like. If you're not going to do anything with the plot, at least try to be funny. Then after being trapped in a storm for a couple of hours, all three of them go insane. Yeah, they go batshit crazy, completely unprompted and out of nowhere. I mean, I could believe it if they were trapped in SpongeBob's house for like a week, but as far as I can tell, they've only been in there for one afternoon. And considering that anything goes with SpongeBob and Patrick, I can believe that they're just playing crazy. But I highly doubt that being denied one single meal would drive Squidward to insanity. The storm ends, and Squidward runs outside of the house, only to find that it's on top of a tornado for some inexplicable reason. And for some inexplicable reason, we're only halfway through the list.
Curse you, Bloomster.
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage can. Person man.
My god, this list is going to kill me. Now we're getting into the real shit. We're now into the stuff that comes to most people's mind when they think of Squidward torture porns. And to start it off, let's go with Cephalopod Lodge. Jesus fucking Christ, where do I begin? Let's start with the fact that the episode begins with Squidward happy.
What is it about the third Wednesday of every month that makes Squidward so happy?
Why the fuck do you care? Even if it's an anomaly, why don't you just mind your own fucking business and let him be happy? A trenchcoat walks in and tells Squidward that tonight is the big night. And so SpongeBob and Patrick, for some reason, decide to follow Squidward to his secret place. Why? I have no fucking clue. The episode forgot to establish it. So immediately, our supposed protagonists are pretty much stalkers butting into someone's business that they shouldn't even be remotely interested in. And they follow him to a pyramid in the middle of nowhere. Squidward meets up with a door guard and is led inside the building. You guys want to remember him for me, please? We see that it's a large gathering of cephalopods, and some strange ritual begins. There's apparently an initiation ritual, where the new recruit is stung by a moray eel, which is apparently their arch nemesis. You know what? I'm done questioning their marine biology skills. If they want to say a cat can breathe underwater, fine. I don't fucking care anymore. I'll stop questioning it if it means we can move on faster. SpongeBob and Patrick have somehow materialized past the door guard and start cheering on. Squidward accidentally reveals that he knows them, and that he led them to the lodge, and he gets kicked out. Yeah, Squidward may have led them there, but don't you guys have security? Like, I don't know, a door guard which requires a secret handshake? It might be a good idea to have one of those around. Just saying. Patrick and SpongeBob try to say it wasn't Squidward's fault that they got into the lodge.
If it wasn't your fault, and it wasn't Squidward's fault, whose fault was it?
Maybe it's your fault.
You know, seeing how you're the door guard, that's a distinct possibility. Then the rest of the episode shamelessly rips off Good Neighbors, and like Pineapple Fever above, just does everything 10 times worse. Squidward is continually put into physical pain and embarrassment, and like I said earlier, it's riding on the heels of SpongeBob and Patrick stalking Squidward for something they shouldn't remotely care about. Eventually, Patrick and SpongeBob get dressed in a giant sock, because apparently it looks like a moray eel. Just roll with it, it'll be over faster. It almost gets him back into the lodge, but Patrick and SpongeBob give him up again, and the episode ends on one of the worst notes of this entire list.
But you'll have to pass the initiation again.
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage can. Person man.
Remember earlier when I said that I could also make a list of the worst Patrick's a Prick episodes? If I did, Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom would rank pretty fucking high on that list. You see, most Patrick's a Prick episodes have the courtesy of at least explaining why he's in the plot. We don't get that here. Apparently, Squidward has tickets to Kelby G's concert. It's weird how often he and his music ends up in Squidward torture porns. Anyway, Squidward refuses to let SpongeBob see his ticket out of fear that it'll be destroyed. So, out of nowhere, Patrick eats it. With no second thoughts. Or first thoughts for that matter. or anything other than a manner of destroying the ticket. Luckily, there's still one way to get the tickets, and some backstage passes to boot, by being the lucky caller on a radio station. And it turns out that SpongeBob is that lucky caller. So the two of them get to go to Kelpie G's concert, but SpongeBob isn't exactly that type of person. We get hit with a few minutes of boring filler before the concert actually begins. Then Patrick appears out of nowhere asking for ketchup for his nachos. Alright, how the fuck did he get in? It was clearly established that people needed tickets to get into that concert. Are you trying to say that Patrick... Oh, God! Oh, fucking God, no! Why the fuck would you put that image in my brain? Oh wait, even that doesn't make any sense because of this line here.
You're probably not gonna get that back before showtime.
All it would have taken is Patrick mentioning that he had a ticket of his own when he fucking ate Squidward for no fucking reason. Then Patrick eats Squidward's backstage pass, and then he eats SpongeBob's backstage pass. I'm a little bit rusty on the basics of comedy, so someone's gonna have to tell me how in any way is seeing someone in a constant state of misery funny? This is a serious question, by the way. The answer is that it's funny if that character is an unlikable asshole. We like to feel a sense of catharsis or justice. Back before the movie, Squidward was an arrogant asshole. He deserved consequences in episodes like Naughty Nautical Neighbors. I think the writers believe that his assholeness carries over to other episodes, but unfortunately for them, it doesn't fucking work that way. Even if it did, they've gone above and beyond with his torment. In this episode, all Squidward wanted to do was see a concert. He wasn't rubbing it in anyone's face, and he wasn't being a jerk. And then Patrick gets up on stage where the bodyguards promptly beat the tar out of him. Oh, that's what would happen if this episode had any semblance of logic. No, instead he's allowed to use the microphone and make a restaurant order. And this guy, who is stupid enough to think that a jazz concert is a fast food place, is smart enough to dodge bodyguards, which have finally come out. Took them long enough, and the patrons seem pretty happy with the guy who just ruined their concert and start carrying him away. Squidward tries to get back the backstage passes from Patrick. They get stopped by a guard and are told to go back to their seat, where someone is taking them both. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't concert tickets entitle you to certain seats? I mean, the two of them won front row seats earlier. That's what the guard just now was for, right? Writers, that brain of yours is getting a little old and dying. It needs exercise or it's going to vanish completely and you will die in your own excretion. I am telling you this for your own good because it'll be a happy day from you when that finally happens. So Kelpie G, who ignored Patrick, throws SpongeBob and Squidward out of the building. And somehow Patrick got backstage because, well, this is a Patrick's a Prick episode. And once again, how the hell did he... You know what? Never mind. We are not going back there. SpongeBob and Squidward run into a suit, and the episode actually gets Squidward to beg. It took them 8 seasons, but they finally got him to do it. Is this what you guys wanted? Or did you just want him to hang himself? What else would they be doing this shit for? SpongeBob plays his ukulele, Kelpie sees him, and signs him to the act. 3 episodes to go, and I want to fucking kill myself.
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage can. Person man.
Yep, voting buddies. The most infamous Squidward torture porn is only number 3 on this list. When I started making this list, everyone thought this would be my number 1. Hell, even I thought that this would be my number 1. But doing my research, watching these episodes again and again, I found that I hate not 1, but 2 Squidward torture porns more than this fucking episode. It's not like I don't hate this episode though. And it's not like I don't know why people hate this episode. Remember when I said that Squid's Visit wasn't the creepiest episode of the show? That's because, to me, this episode is. Because this episode is creepy. It's intensely creepy. It's unwatchably creepy. Let's start with the fact that SpongeBob decides to annoy Squidward because he was just breathing. When Squidward decides to go away to ignore him, SpongeBob decides to chase him down. Why? Because Squidward left his car keys behind. Yeah, Squidward has a car in this episode, which gets him to run through a stop sign, which forces him to spend a day in hell. Yeah, Squidward has to go to boating school. Fan-fucking-tastic.
I have impeccable boat smarts.
Don't fucking remind me. And as you might imagine, SpongeBob is there. Now here's an interesting fact. For this entire episode, Mrs. Puff seems to have forgotten how horrible that SpongeBob is.
He is the bane of my existence.
Yours too?
What I meant is that she doesn't seem to fucking care. And then we get into the creepy aspect. SpongeBob seems to have a rather unsettling attraction to Squidward that constantly surfaces throughout the entire episode. When the episode isn't focusing on the stalker with a crush, it's focused on giving Squidward beating after beating. And what was Squidward's crime in this episode? Trying to get away from SpongeBob. For doing that, he's forced to be stuck with SpongeBob. For getting pissed about it, he ends up getting beaten up. For no fucking reason, Mrs. Puff forces Squidward to drive with SpongeBob, despite knowing how dangerous SpongeBob is, knowing that Squidward also hates SpongeBob, and never having partners drive in any other episode ever. This leads to a random shrink ray incident that ends up with Squidward being beaten up and ending up in a body cast. Because he's in a body cast, he ends up failing the test, which any normal teacher or Mrs. Puff in any other episode would allow him to take when he's not injured. And so he gets sentenced to another week in boating school. The worst part of this episode is obviously the ending, where after being righteously pissed, Squidward yells at SpongeBob, and circumstances forces him to call SpongeBob his boating buddy, and Squidward fails anyway. Which means next week the same shit will happen, but even worse. So yeah, boating buddies is heinously bad. The only question is what could possibly top it? Well,
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage can. Person man.
so what outright shoots Choir Boys into the top 2? 2 words: malicious intent. In most of the previous episodes, SpongeBob tormented Squidward through accidents or complete stupidity. So take one of those episodes and have SpongeBob actively attempt to annoy Squidward, take his dreams away, and hurt him. Don't believe me? Well, the episode starts with Squidward practicing singing in the shower when he passes by his toilet.
Don't feel bad. He didn't use me yesterday either.
Are you suggesting that Squidward doesn't— Oh, God! What the fuck is with these episodes and their suggestions of shit? Outside, Squidward passes by SpongeBob and smiles because he's feeling down. Remember this because apparently this is the most heinous crime that one could possibly commit. It's used to give justification for SpongeBob trying to nag Squidward, chase him down, dig a giant pothole to quote-unquote get Squidward's attention, which forces him to be surrounded by jellyfish. Stuck in the jellyfish, SpongeBob.
Now I have a captive audience.
It's like that one line is all that I needed to see each and every one of these torture porns as purposeful on SpongeBob's behalf. It continues to sing as Squidward gets repeatedly zapped. How is this funny? Just because Squidward is at the ass of your jokes does not automatically make them funny.
Squidward, could you keep it down, please? I'm trying to find my starting pitch here.
Go die in a hole along with anyone who made up this trite. Surprisingly, Zeus Service and Casey Alexander aren't behind most of these Squidward torture porns. They're only behind 2 of them so far. Now the guys you want to blame are Aaron Springer and Richard Purcell. At least one of them has written for every episode on this list with the exception of Restraining SpongeBob. But that episode had Paul Tippett, the head honcho himself. So at least one of those guys seems to have a very real vendetta against Squidward. Let's deal with Richard Purcell first. He was a writer on Ren and Stimpy's adult party cartoon. Moving on. Aaron Springer is a different beast altogether. Most people know that he wrote on SpongeBob back when it was good, working on episodes like Band Geeks. Do you know what else this guy did? No, seriously, take a guess. You'll never get it. This guy wrote for Samurai Jack. 3 of his episodes were on my top 10 list. There's Losing Your Touch, and then there's Going Fucking Insane. Jesus fucking Christ, that's disgusting. One reason this episode is so high on the list is that we're constantly given terrible singing and annoying throat clearing all the way through. Needless to say, it grates on you. Yeah, this is the only episode on the list that's unlistenable on top of unwatchable. Also, SpongeBob suddenly gets the ability to sing greatly and upstages Squidward at the men's chorus. So yeah, we have an episode where Squidward does next to nothing wrong, SpongeBob continually torments him to a severe degree and does it knowingly, and SpongeBob wins in the end. What could possibly be worse?
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life in a garbage can. Person man, is he depressed or is he a mess? Does he feel totally worthless? Who came up with person man, degraded man, person man?
Now, I don't think a lot of people will agree with me here, because when it comes to worst SpongeBob episodes, I always give a more abstract answer. I seem to hate more what each episode represents, rather than its overall production. So bear with me as I present my number 1, which is probably an episode you most likely don't care about. Presenting A Breath of Fresh Squidward. Most of you are probably thinking that it does belong on the list just further down, and definitely not number 1. Well, let me try to explain why I hate this episode so much. The episode starts with SpongeBob and Patrick watching Squidward sleep. Apparently a favorite pastime of theirs is watching the sunrise in Squidward's bedroom. And then we see a book of all of the main holidays, while it looks like Squidward is about to have an aneurysm.
Do you remember what I told you happens to my brain every time I see you?
Whenever Squidward sees us, the storm clouds in his brain roll in and a nasty storm rages. Squidward's happy gland is forced to take shelter in the recesses of his mind.
As far as I can tell, they believe this story. Yeah, I'm calling this episode the worst Squidward torture porn, taking every one of those other ones into account. This time, Squidward tries to use an electric fence to keep SpongeBob and Patrick out. And of course, the 2 of them think they're invited to a fence-warming party. So, Squidward catapults them away and turns on the fence. Considering Squidward's experience with home security, we all know that this isn't going to work for a second. Yeah, somehow they get catapulted back into Squidward's fence. He angrily touches the security gate, which gets himself electrocuted. SpongeBob and Patrick are totally unaware that Squidward is being electrocuted in front of them, despite being repeatedly stung and shocked by electric jellyfish. The electroshock switches Squidward's personality entirely. He wants to go to the petting zoo with SpongeBob and Patrick, so Squidward is actually happy. Even SpongeBob sees that Squidward is happier, and he says that with a smile. Remember that. Things get interesting when Squidward sneaks into SpongeBob's house. Why SpongeBob didn't sneak into Squidward's house that morning, I have no idea. But as you can see, this episode is giving SpongeBob a taste of his own medicine. Like most episodes that end up at the top of my worst lists, they do something right. SpongeBob has to deal with his own SpongeBob, and let me just say that after everything I've seen, it's really fucking cathartic.
And you, Mr. Smiley-Face Krabby Patty, no one can come between us.
I know this doesn't have anything to do with anything, but this episode's sister episode is To Love a Patty. Now here's what really sticks it for me. Squidward is acting like SpongeBob. You know, the fucking annoying one that sneaks into Squidward's house, and the episode itself sees him as an antagonist. Every time Squidward tries to do something that SpongeBob usually does, he's treated like a creep. So yeah, the writers, or the entire universe, is a hypocrite. Good to know.
You know, he might be as good a fry cook as you.
You know, I'd be more sympathetic with SpongeBob here if the episode didn't begin with him admitting that he breaks into Squidward's house and watches him sleep every single morning. Not to mention all the other fucking stuff I've seen. Okay, I normally don't criticize animation errors, but how the hell do you miss the grills in the background? So it turns out that Squidward is a better SpongeBob than SpongeBob, and ends up becoming the new Employee of the Month. Once again, after all the shit I've seen, it's extremely cathartic. And like I said, this episode keeps expecting me to feel sorry for what's happening to SpongeBob, which is not going to happen. SpongeBob, you deserve a SpongeBob of your own. Even the SpongeBob we get in this episode deserves his own SpongeBob. Hey SpongeBob, can I please get a side of fries with those tears? On second thought, they're delicious enough by themselves. Oh sorry, do I sound like an asshole? Did you notice everything that I saw this creature do? Then there's a party at Patrick's house, and SpongeBob is still crying. Seriously dude, you lost an award. Get over yourself.
How's the cake, SpongeBob?
See SpongeBob, he's not being an asshole. He's asking these questions in earnest. See how it fucking feels? And Pogo dancing with Patrick seems to be SpongeBob's final straw. He snaps and basically becomes a whiny spoiled brat, and kicks Squidward out of his own party, in someone else's house, and everyone else continues the party. This forces Squidward to cry, which I actually do feel sorry for, which causes him to electrocute himself. You know, despite the fence blowing a gasket earlier. Like I said, it's not so much that this episode has the most torment given to Squidward, or even that it's the worst put together. It's that the episode expects me to buy the SpongeBob that I've dealt with in Boating Buddies, in Choir Boys, in Cephalopod Lodge, in Good Neighbors as the good guy, and the Squidward in those very episodes as the bad guy. Let's just say that that's perhaps the most insulting thing that a writer can try and do. If SpongeBob learned that being an annoying menace that makes Squidward want to slit his wrists and hang himself in this episode, then it would probably be decent. Hell, it might even be great. But it's that little touch that slides it right into the worst of the worst.
Particle man, doing the things a particle can. What's he like? It's not important. Particle man, is he a dot or is he a speck? When he's underwater, does he get wet? Or does the water get him instead? Nobody knows. Particle man.